وزدنا علما نافعا يا كريم. Alhamdulillah, we'll continue discussing the legal rulings related to Salat. Just a point from last week, we mentioned the desirable prayers, and we mentioned some significant nights that should be enlivened with worship, preferably most of the night. And the final point concerning this mas'ala is what the scholars of the Hanafi School of Law mentioned, that it is makruh to gather on these significant nights to enliven them if the gathering is by mutual invitation, such that if there are more than 3 people besides the imam, so you have 5 people or more all together gathering on that significant night, wherever it may be, in the masjid or outside of the masjid, then this is disliked to do so. But the difference of opinion concerning this stems back to the time of the Salaf, the time of the Tabi'een. So from the time of the Tabi'een, that noble generation, there were scholars, especially from the Sham region, who said it is okay, it is permissible, without any karaha, any dislikeness, to gather on these significant nights. In the masajid, for example, such as Laylat al-Qadr, Nisf Sha'ban, these significant nights. So therefore, the scholars, there are those who say, therefore, it is permissible for the people to gather on these significant nights, especially in this day and age, where if a person does not gather with his fellow Muslims to enliven these significant nights, he knows that if he goes home, he's going to fall asleep and he won't be waking up until after Adhan al-Fajr, and he's missed the chance to enliven this night. So if a person knows that on Laylat al-Qadr, for example, or Nisf Sha'ban, or the last 10 nights of Ramadan, the last 10 nights of Ramadan, that by coming to the masjid, he will stay awake and engaged in devotion, then that is a valid opinion to take by. That is a valid opinion. Tonight we'll talk about as-salatu qa'idan, performing salat while sitting. Obligatory, the fard salat in the sitting posture, if one is capable of standing. Similarly, the wajib, the necessary salat in the sitting position, is invalid when one is capable of standing. The additional, the nafil salat in the sitting posture is valid despite one being capable of standing. So fard salat and wajib salat, if you're able to stand, you must stand. The additional, the nafil salat, you may sit and perform that salat even if you are able to stand. So the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ concerning this, concerning the fard and the wajib, the Prophet ﷺ said, pray standing. If you are unable, then pray sitting. If you are unable, then on your side. If you are unable, then on your back. Allah Ta'ala does not burden a soul beyond its scope. Concerning the nafil salat and the permissibility of performing nafil sitting down, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever prays standing, then that is better. And whoever prays sitting, then he receives half the reward of that. Imam al-Nawawi said, this is concerning the additional prayers, the nafil salat. That whoever prays standing, then it is better. And whoever prays sitting, then he receives half the reward of the person standing. This is concerning the additional nafil salat. As for the fard, it is impermissible to sit in the fard salat despite having the ability to stand up. And this is by ijma'. Ijma', the agreement of all the imams and jurists of the ummah. If he is unable to stand for the nafil salat, if a person prays his nafil salat sitting, because he is unable to stand, then he receives the complete reward. The complete reward. And we mentioned that again. So we said the additional salat, and when we say additional salat, we spoke about the types of additional salat, whether that's the ratiba, the extra salat, voluntary prayers before and after the fard salat, or it's the mustahab, those desirable types of salawat that we mentioned. Regardless whether it is ratiba or mustahabba, if it is an additional prayer, then you may pray sitting even though you are able to stand. And here we said it is permissible to pray the nafil sitting. So that excludes lying down on your side or on your back without an excuse. So the nafil salat, you are allowed to pray it sitting, even though you are able to stand. But you cannot pray it on your side or on your back unless you are excused, unless you are extremely sick. The one who performs an additional, the nafil salat in the sitting posture without an excuse receives half the reward of the one who performs it standing. We mentioned this. Half the reward of the person standing if it is without an excuse. But if he's performing the nafil salat due to an excuse, an injury or a sickness which prevents him from being able to stand, then he receives the same reward as the person standing. The one who performs salat in the sitting posture sits in the same way as he sits in the tashahhud. The same way as he sits in the tashahhud. So he sits the same way as he is sitting on his knees. The best way to be sitting. And he says Allahu Akbar and places his hands under his navel as he would place them when he is standing. But now he's in the tashahhud position. And he remains that way throughout the entire salat. He remains that way throughout the entire salat. If one begins an additional nafil salat standing, it is permissible for him to complete it in the sitting posture, and this will not be disliked. So he started the salat standing, he can sit halfway through the nafil salat. So he prayed the first rak'ah standing, then when he finished his sujood of the first rak'ah, the two sajdas, he remained sitting, and he continued the second rak'ah in the sitting position. For the nafil salat, that is permissible, even if there is no excuse. Now concerning salat on an animal, on a conveyance, on a horse or a camel or the likes, which salat is invalid on a riding animal? The fard salat and the wajib salat. So the obligatory salat performed whilst on the back of an animal is invalid. Similarly, the wajib salat performed whilst on the back of an animal is invalid. Thus, the witr salat, which is wajib, the vow, the nadhr salat, a person makes a vow to perform salat, that is wajib, and repeating the qada of an additional prayer which was void after commencing it. So a person was praying a nafil salat, an additional prayer, but then that became void for whatever reason. Then it becomes wajib, necessary for him to repeat that salat, to do qada of that nafil salat. So that is a wajib salat. All of these examples of wajib are not permissible on the back of an animal. Now we mention the cases in which this salat is valid. So we said firstly, the fard salat and the wajib salat is impermissible on the back while sitting on the animal without an excuse, because there's no difficulty in getting off that riding animal and performing your salat standing on the ground.
Now, therefore, when is it valid? When there is a necessity, when there is an excuse and a reason for that person or that forces that person to remain on the back of the animal. So salat on the back of an animal, whether it is obligatory or necessary, fard or wajib, is valid if the person performing the prayer is excused, if he has a udhr, if there is a darura, if there is a necessity. Like, example, fear of an enemy, if he dismounts. Fear of an enemy, if he dismounts the animal. Or, for example, if he gets out of the car. Or he fears a predatory animal. Or he fears his animal fleeing. He fears his animal, that the animal will become uncontrollable by the rider dismounting from it. If he gets off, he fears that he won't be able to mount it again. Or there is mud at that place. If you were to pray on the ground in that area, he will soil his face with mud. Not that it's a bit moist, the ground. Right? He will soil his face with mud. Or if he places a cloth on a blanket on that muddy ground, it will get ruined. So in this case, he can remain on that riding animal and perform his salat even if it is a fard or a wajib salat. Similarly, salat sitting on the animal is valid if after demounting he is unable to mount the animal on his own and there is nobody to help him remount it. He can get off the animal, he can demount it, but if he wants to remount the animal, he's unable and there's nobody to help him. So he remains on that animal and he performs his fard and wajib salat. So in these cases, the fard salat is valid, but there's a condition. He must stop that riding animal, face it, turn it towards the qibla if he is able. So he stops it and he turns it towards the qibla if he is able to. If he is unable, he fears an enemy, then he prays however he is able to, even if the animal is moving, even if it is not facing the qibla, he needs to pray. He's going to miss the salat. He'll pray however he can. And in all these cases, if he performs the salat in these situations, he does not need to repeat the salat afterwards. So therefore, when it comes to riding on the animal, praying salat on the riding animal, even if he prays standing with ruku' and sujood on that riding animal, the salat is still invalid. The salat is still invalid. So there needs to be an excuse. And we'll see how he performs that salat if there is an excuse. We said he stops it and he faces the qibla, and his ruku' and sujood become gestures, indications with his head by nodding, as we'll mention. So that was concerning the fard and the wajib. Now concerning the sunan mu'akkada, the emphasized, the additional prayers. Sunan mu'akkada, the emphasized additional prayers, are permissible, they are valid on an animal. So the nafil salat, all those additional prayers are valid on an animal. However, for the additional salat of fajr, he demounts because it is more emphasized than others. So all the nawafil he can pray on the riding animal, except the sunnah of fajr, he must demount. And concerning those nawafil, even if there's no excuse, so for the fard and the wajib, there needs to be an excuse. For the nawafil, even if there's no excuse, he can pray on that riding animal. The one condition we will mention is that he must be outside of the city, outside of the city limits. So here we said, when one performs salat on an animal outside the city, he performs it through gestures, ima, nodding for ruku' and sujood, in whichever direction his animal is facing. So whether he is a musafir or he is a muqim, he's traveling or he's residing, he wants to pray that nafil salat, it is permissible. He does not need an excuse. We said the one condition is that it's kharij al-Misr, outside of the city limits. So if he's still within the city limits, where there are suburban areas and there's a continuation of homes, he hasn't reached the bush or the forest or where the city ends, then he cannot pray the nafil on his riding animal or in the car with gestures. It is only when he's outside of the city limits. He performs it through gestures, ima, nodding for ruku' and sujood, in whichever direction his animal is facing, whichever direction his animal is facing. So he does not need to face the qibla for this nafil salat at the beginning, according to the Hanafi school. According to the Shafi school, if he's praying this salat, he must first turn his riding animal towards the qibla, begin his salat, and then begin the salat. In the Hanafi school, whichever direction he's traveling in, he wants to pray his nafil salat, he says Allahu Akbar and begins the salat. If he prays in another direction, for whatever reason, another direction than the direction that the animal is traveling in or that he is traveling, then, and that direction is other than the qibla, the salat is invalid. Because there is no necessity, no darura for him to be praying in another direction than the direction that his animal is traveling. Now concerning salat fi safina, salat on a ship. The obligatory, the fard salat on a moving, traveling ship while seated without an excuse is valid according to Imam Abu Hanifa. The obligatory, the fard salat on a moving, traveling ship while seated without an excuse is invalid according to Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad. So a valid reason may include feeling dizzy or being unable to exit the ship. So a person is on a boat or a ship, the salat on that ship is impermissible whilst he is able to exit that ship. So if he's able to exit the ship, then he does so. In the case where he's not able to, then the salat is valid and it is permissible for him to perform the salat on that boat, on that ship, sitting. According to Imam Abu Hanifa, he can pray sitting even though he does not have an excuse. As long as that is a traveling, a moving, sailing ship, then he can pray sitting. It's better for him to stand, but he does not need an excuse to pray sitting. And the one condition is that he faces the qibla when he begins the salat. Now he needs to turn towards the qibla when he wishes to begin the salat. And as we mentioned, every time that ship or that boat turns away from the qibla, then he turns so that he remains facing towards the qibla throughout the entire salat. According to the two students of Imam Abu Hanifa, they said that the fard on the moving ship is, while sitting, is invalid if a person does so without an excuse. So he needs an excuse to be sitting. And this difference of opinion, as we mentioned, stems from the time of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and from the time of the Tabi'een. These were opinions which were present amongst the Salaf, that the Salaf even disagreed upon. So they're both strong opinions. Imam Abu Hanifa, the view is that almost every time you try to perform salat on a boat, you're going to get seasick. You're going to feel dizziness. You're going to feel nauseous. So therefore, it is permissible for you to pray sitting before that dizziness and that you feel, before you get motion sickness. Whereas according to the Sahibain, the two students, they said, begin your salat, you must begin your salat standing, and then if you get dizzy, if you feel nauseous, then sit down. So it's a very slight difference there. Salat through gestures, indication, ima, nodding for ruku' and sujood on a ship is not valid for the person who is able to bow and prostrate. So here, pay attention, when we say on the moving ship you pray sitting, that is with ruku' and sujood. Sitting with ruku' and sujood. If you are able to, you must perform the ruku' and the sujood. So you are excused from standing, but you still must perform the ruku' and the sujood. Therefore, if you only do ima on that moving ship, so you sit down, and for the ruku' you nod, you lean forward, and then you exit ruku', and then for sujood, entering sujood, you lean a bit further than you were leaning for ruku'. Doing so, whilst you're able to do ruku' and sujood, is invalid. The salat will be invalid. So many people are unaware of this. I'm on a ship, or on, similarly, we'll mention the airplane. For whatever reason, there's turbulence, I can't stand. You can still sit and do ruku' and sujood. If you must still do so if you are able to. It is only when you are unable to do so, then you have the option of ima, nodding. So concerning the tatawwa', the additional salat on the ship, sitting, it also must be with ruku' and sujood. Even the nafil on the ship must be with ruku' and sujood. Nodding is impermissible and invalid if he is able to do ruku' and sujood, as opposed to the one who is riding on the animal. So when he is riding on the animal, there is more flexibility. For the nafil, he nods for his ruku' and sujood. But on the ship, for the nafil additional prayers, he must still do the ruku' and the sujood if he is able to. If the ship is tied down, it is docked at shore. So first we mentioned the moving ship, the rules related to that. Now, if that ship is tied down or it is docked at shore, it's not anchored at sea, it's anchored at shore and it's tied to the shore. Salat on board in the sitting posture is not valid when the person is able to stand. So now it's different. You must stand, and you cannot sit unless you are unable to stand. There must be an excuse for you to perform the salat sitting. If the person is not able to exit the ship, then performing salat on board the ship is permissible. It is valid, whether the ship is docked, whether it is anchored, or it is moving and sailing. And we spoke about how that is done. So we'll stop there, inshallah, and next week we'll discuss similar situations to salat on a ship, which is salat on a train or an airplane. So salat in the train and in the airplane, the rules related to that, and that is similar to salat on the boat. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.